Hi, guys. I hope you guys are having a great week, and I wanted to talk to you today about our next assignment. I know that we'll be studying two authors this week. One is Gertrude Stein, and the other is E.A. Robinson. A couple of the poems you may already be familiar with because these are very important poems and very famous poems of his. They're often anthologized, especially Richard Cory. So you may be familiar with these, but as you read the introduction to E.A. Robinson and you think about these two selections I've chosen for us to read, I really want you to think about the time period, what you have learned in the past week about this new modern age and the modern disappointments. And I want to see you really start pulling in from what you learned last week and bringing in some of that information into our discussion this week. So feel free to bring in perhaps quotations that you made or things that you learned from last week about this time period into your discussion of E.A. Robinson. Well, very quickly, I have class in just a few minutes in Comp 2, but I want to read a couple of these selections with you and kind of isolate some items that you no doubt will see and note yourselves, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. The very first poem, I remember hearing this poem early on in my life, and then again in various literature classes in pursuit of my master's degree. But I just want to say this probably will not be the last time that you read this poem, especially those of you who are English majors, and it may certainly not be the first time you've been introduced to it. But let's discuss it, shall we? Richard Cory. Whenever Richard Cory went downtown, we people on the pavement looked at him. He was a gentleman from sole to crown, clean-favored and imperially slim. And he was always quietly arrayed, and he was always human when he talked. But still he fluttered pulses when he said, "Good morning," and he glittered when he walked. And he was rich, yes, richer than a king, and admirably schooled in every grace. In fine, we thought that he was everything to make us wish that we were in his place. So on we worked and waited for the light, and went without the meat and cursed the bread. And Richard Cory, one calm summer night, went home and put a bullet through his head. If this is your first trip into this poem, I mean, it's one of those where you go, what? All of a sudden Richard Cory dies. You don't expect that, and that's exactly what E.A. Robinson was going for here. So I want you to look at some of the phrases. I would love to see you incorporate phrases into your essay, whatever it is that you decide to discuss this week and the thematic elements that you want to bring in. But I want to just kind of remind you of how important it is to get the meaning here. Sometimes we think we know, we think we know people, and we think we know what they're going through, and because they may mask it or because they have things that we don't, we think that their lives are better. And I want you to really look at this because remember, there's a disparity of wealth. There's a real concern about economic disparity in this time period as well, and what people go through. And this is a man that first of all, there's this logic issue. I love how it says he was a gentleman from sole to crown. There are all these generalizations that the narrator of this poem makes. There are these kinds of things that he assumes. Nobody's a gentleman from sole to crown every day of their lives. Sometimes they do not act like gentlemen. Does anybody hear me? So look at some of these. He was always quietly arrayed. Well, clearly, always is. In Comp 2, we talk about the logical fallacies, and we talk about being careful not to use always, because very rarely is that true. But this is from the voice of someone who thinks they know Richard Cory well, always human when he talked, and they think they know everything about him. Good morning, he glittered when he walked. So this is someone that everybody admired, and someone that everyone thought, oh, I wish I could be that person. I mean, it seemed like everything they touched turned to gold, that they had everything they needed, that they had perfect social grace. They were admired by so many people, and yet all that time, even though they had so much, we learned that Richard Cory was struggling with something inside that he never allowed anyone to know about. And I'm telling you, this is the kind of poem that will arrest you, rest your soul, and make you really think about how we deal with other people and it doesn't matter what social status you are, how much money you have or you don't. The human condition is such that we all go through things, and you may decide to talk about this too, but depression, human struggle, it does not go away just because you have a lot of money or you can put on a good mask. That reminds me of We Wear the Mask. I just want to say right here, but if you want to incorporate lines from other pieces that we've read, like We Wear the Mask, it really works here, doesn't it? I mean, people are going through things, and some people wear really great masks, and you never know what's going on underneath that. And then there's always this surprise moment when you think, like for instance, you think somebody's marriage is just wonderful, and I wish I had their life, and this, that, and the other, and then you find out it wasn't really all that wonderful after all. They were human after all. And I want to say this, guys. Every human being has struggles. We're not always perfect, and we're not always wearing the mask. Sometimes the masks come off. So I want you to read through there and pick out phrases that maybe I'm not even mentioning right now, but it talks about his life. But I think, interestingly, one of the most alarming lines is right here toward the end in Richard Cory. One calm summer night, not a night of some kind of discord, chaos, not a night of fireworks going off or something that triggers something awful within him. One calm summer night, went home and put a bullet through his head. I'm telling you, this is a beautiful poem, and it really begs the question to think about others around us, and not only others around us, but ourselves as well. So I'm on 6 minutes. Let's go ahead and go to Miniver Cheesy. Now this one, Cheevy, not cheesy. If you read the introduction to this, you know that this is the introduction. The text introduction says, hey, this is his life. That E.A. Robinson always felt like he was in the wrong time, that he was misunderstood, and he had an affinity to the past, affinity to the graces of the past, etc. And, I think a lot of times in my classes when I ask people, if I could transport you to any time, where would you go? A lot of people pick times in the past. Rarely I'll have people say, I want to go to the future. And I say, well, that's very daring, isn't it, to go to the unknown? And whatever your answer is, I mean, we've all thought about what it would be like if we could go back and what time period and why. So that's something to think about as well. But here we go. I don't have a lot of time. I'm supposed to be in class in 3 minutes, so let's do this, shall we? Miniver Cheevy, child of scorn, grew lean while he assailed the seasons. He wept that he was ever born, and he had reasons. We could go off there, couldn't we? Miniver loved the days of old, when swords were bright and steeds were prancing. The vision of a warrior bold would set him dancing. Interesting, what makes us happy enough to jump up and dance for joy. Dancing often here dealing with what makes us happy, where we let loose and let go, and we don't care really about what people think about us, and we dance in the moment. We spin, we jump, we leap. Think about the words. Think about what it's saying. I want you to get to the point where you look at these things yourselves and you say, yeah, you feast on each phrase. Miniver sighed for what was not. How many of us have done that? And dreamed and rested from his labors. He dreamed of Thebes and Camelot and Priam's neighbors. Miniver mourned the ripe renown that made so many a name so fragrant. He mourned romance now on the town, and art, a vagrant. Miniver loved the Medici, albeit he had never seen one. Interesting. He would have sinned incessantly could he have been one. Think about what he's saying here. What you'd trade soul for. What you'd give your own soul for. That's kind of interesting. It tells us a little bit about his character, a little bit more about his character. Miniver cursed the commonplace and eyed a khaki suit with loathing. He missed the medieval grace of iron clothing. Miniver scorned the gold he sought, but sore annoyed was he without it. Miniver thought and thought and thought and thought about it. Miniver Cheevy, born too late, scratched his head and kept on thinking. Miniver coughed and called it fate and kept on drinking. I mean, both of these poems, I've read both of them in various anthologies. They're very popular pieces by E.A. Robinson. And I would say this, don't underestimate, just because his introduction isn't as long as everybody else's. His voice is crystal clear, and it sends us messages about the frustration of this time period and this particular writer's frustration with the time period. Read about his biography. Read that part about his family, his dad losing everything and what it did to his family. And it's no wonder he felt this way. He knew what it was like to have a lot and to have a little bit, to lose it all, to be discouraged, to be disillusioned. Read between the lines. And as I tell you, feel free to go out there online and discover more for yourself. I'm running out of time, but guys, I could talk about these all day long. I love this poetry. So really, I can't wait to hear what you have to say about it. And okay, I'm done. I've got to go. Have a great week. Bye-bye.